This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alex Masper. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the show. If you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. Before I start talking anything sports, I want to remind you all of a couple of things. First, please subscribe to the podcast on whatever podcasting app or website you are listening to this on. To do that, you can just go to our homepage and hit the subscribe button. If you're on Apple Podcasts, it'll be in the top right-hand corner with next to that plus sign that says subscribe. You want to subscribe to the podcast for a couple of reasons, but the main one being you get those alerts and those notifications on your phone, on your laptop, on your watch, on whatever you may be listening to this episode on, and you can always know when we drop a new episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast here at the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, please subscribe to the podcast so you can get those alerts and notifications, and that way you can never miss an episode and be one of the first people to listen to a new episode when we release it. Again, please subscribe to the podcast. We'd also really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review on that same podcasting app or website on that same device. Just to give us a boost of confidence, to let us know that you guys are enjoying the content and discussion points and the structure of the show. And if you are, again, we would really appreciate it if you leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general on that same Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Podbean, whatever you might be listening to this on. Again, same thing, just go to the homepage and click leave a review. That would give us a big boost of confidence. Again, it would let us know that you guys are enjoying the structure of the show and everything about it. So that would be awesome if you could. And finally, if you could follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can primarily follow us. Over there, we can interact and pretty much talk about anything. Over on social media, we can talk about sports, we can talk about life, we're going to do some live tweeting of some big-time hockey games or baseball games when the season starts. Whatever it may be, all of those interaction needs can be found on social media. So again, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can primarily follow us, and we would love if you could do so. I hope wherever you are and however you may be listening, you and your family are happy and healthy during these extremely trying times in the world today. We have a fantastic show for you all today. Coming up later on in the episode, I do want to get to Justin Fields' pro day, some of the teams that were there, what it could mean for him and his draft stock, and why I am not buying the San Francisco Mac Jones 3rd overall pick rumors. We'll get into that later on in the show. On top of that, we'll get into Julian Edelman retiring. Is he a Hall of Famer? I'll give my 2 cents on that. James Conner has signed a 1-year deal to be the new running back of the Arizona Cardinals. We'll get into that, what he means for that offense. As well as Giovani Bernard signing a 1-year deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the reigning Super Bowl champions, after having a pretty decent year with the Cincinnati Bengals last season. He's a veteran to add to that running back room. He will pair up with, of course, Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones as well. So we'll get into what he could bring to that offense in Tampa Bay, and we'll get into why I'm having some serious doubts about the Brooklyn Nets potentially coming out of the Eastern Conference, let alone being NBA champions. So it's going to be an absolutely packed show for you all. No mock draft today, but I think I'll probably give you a new one in my episode after this. I don't want to do one every episode. I just like doing them when there's a new sort of piece of information out there. And of course, there'll probably be a trade or some announcement or just any report about who's drafting who coming out in the next week or so. And then when that happens, we'll definitely do another full mock draft. And the week of the NFL draft, the episode before, I'm going to do probably a 2-segment full 32 pick mock draft. I do want to do the second half of the first round, which I haven't gotten to yet. That will be coming up. Draft week, which is about a little over 2 weeks away. I'm super excited for the draft this year. I think the draft class is absolutely loaded offensive talent-wise, which means it's going to be an entertaining draft. I think that we're going to see a little bit more trades than usual. I think the COVID year has definitely given people some question marks about some draft picks, and it means that some teams might be sold on some prospects than others, and maybe teams have different draft boards this year more than ever. Of course, teams are always going to like the same amount of players. Everybody likes Jamar Chase. Everybody wants Trevor Lawrence. Everybody wants this guy. But there might be some teams that, have some surprise guys higher on their draft board than some people give it credit for because of the COVID year and how weird it's been. I think teams might approach the draft a little bit differently as well. So there's going to be a lot of movements, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And definitely that week of the draft, I'll be giving you a full 32-pick first-round mock draft. And, of course, we'll have the reaction to all 3 of the days. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait for it. The NFL is just the gift that keeps on giving. And we do have a piece of free agency news. Again, this guy traditionally doesn't sign at the beginning of free agency. He took his time. But Jadeveon Clowney finally has a new home, and he will be, in fact, signing with the Cleveland Browns. The defensive end / linebacker hybrid player, former All-Pro, is heading to Cleveland on a 1-year, $10 million deal. I believe it's $8 million in base salary and then another $2 million with incentives. Jadeveon Clowney is obviously a big name, a name that probably Cleveland isn't used to getting consistently. And again, it's an interesting fit to say the least. Jadeveon Clowney has obviously always been this uber athlete, defensive end linebacker hybrid who's been known for stopping the run, getting tackles, and chasing after quarterbacks. Again, when he was coming out of college out of South Carolina, people were giving him comparisons to some of the greatest defensive players of all time. Has he ever actually lived up to that hype? That's up for debate. People have questioned his work ethic in the past and things like that. But at the end of the day, when Jadeveon Clowney is at his best, he is an incredibly effective player on the defensive end, specifically in the run game, and he can get after the passer a little bit as well. His best years came in 2017 and 2018 when he was with Houston. He had 9.5 sacks in 2017 and 9 sacks in 2018, on top of having incredible 47 tackles and 59 tackles. Obviously one of the best run stuffers in the game as well those 2 years. Has sort of taken a dip ever since he's left the Houston Texans organization following that career year. Arguably in 2017, he followed it up with an incredible year in 2018. Then when he was traded to Seattle, his numbers dipped significantly, playing in 13 games, but only recording 3 sacks. And then last year, he was exclusively with the Tennessee Titans on that 1-year deal as well. Remember, he didn't really sign at the beginning of free agency last year either. He took his time and waited through the training camp period, I believe. So he signed a little bit earlier this time, but last year he actually did not record a sack. I believe he only played in 3 or 4 games, or he actually played in 8 games before getting hurt and missing the rest of the season. So he really was a non-factor last year. Only 19 tackles, 14 solo tackles last year. Again, 0 sacks. So this is a complete 1-year prove-it deal for Jadeveon Clowney, who is still in his athletic prime at just 28 years old. A look for him to maybe put up some big-time numbers on an already stacked defensive line on a really, really nice team now in Cleveland that's obviously going to play a lot of national televised games. It's going to get a lot of eyes on Jadeveon Clowney, who has always wanted a really big payday. He's been seeking it ever since right before really he left Houston. That was the biggest reason why he left, was they weren't willing to pay him the big-time contract. Was traded to Seattle, hopefully trying to sign that extension. Didn't really work out in Seattle. Goes to Tennessee, gets hurt and is a non-factor, and he's back on the 1-year deal sort of grind that he's on now. Again, 1 year, $8 million, $2 million in sort of incentives to make it up to a 1-year, $10 million deal in Cleveland. And again, he has some interesting stats when you look at it. He's obviously only played in 83 games in 8 years, so he's averaging a little under 11 games per season, which is not great. So it's a guy who's told you he's pretty much been injured a lot throughout the season. 32 sacks in his career in 83 games is a nice number, not a great number for someone who's supposedly an all-time defensive end talent, but he does have 186 solo tackles and 9 forced fumbles. But the thing with Jadeveon Clowney is he's usually the best defensive, most athletic guy you have on your defensive line and is getting a ton of double teams. Why I love this move for Cleveland is, one, it's not too expensive. 1 year, $10 million deals are, it's like a $20 bill in the NFL, honestly. It's like something that is a little, okay, I'm spending some money on this, but at the end of the day, it's not breaking the bank or anything like that. 1 year, $10 million is nothing for these NFL teams, nothing in terms of committing to the future or anything like that as well. And Jadeveon Clowney gets to add to a really, really big-time strength of the Cleveland Browns team. The defensive line is probably the best part of that Cleveland Brown defense, and when you watch the game against Pittsburgh, when they absolutely dominated from start to finish, that defensive line was one of the biggest reasons why Pittsburgh sort of fell and crumbled so early in that game, right before in the playoffs, obviously, which was a lot of fun to watch. But at the end of the day, I think what's the most important thing about Jadeveon Clowney right now is him getting his money eventually. He has wanted that payday for a couple of years now, and I think Cleveland is a great opportunity for him, maybe to not necessarily get that extension, but if this year Cleveland goes on a deep playoff run and he gets close to double-digit sacks this season, has a big-time resurgence year, there will be a team next year when Jadeveon Clowney is only 29 years old that will throw him a 3-year, $30 to $40 million contract, in my opinion, which is what Jadeveon Clowney is seeking. He is seeking financial security and really just security overall as he enters his 30s, when defensive ends and edge rushers sort of start to lose a step. So again, he needs to have a big-time year in Cleveland. Jadeveon Clowney needed to really have a big-time year last year in Tennessee to make up for the so-so year he had in Seattle. He gets an injury pass, but this year is a massive year in terms of Jadeveon Clowney's career. If he doesn't have a great year this year, and again, produces really under 7 sacks. I need at least 7 sacks from Jadeveon Clowney in order for me to consider you a premier edge rusher in this league. You'd really like to see Jadeveon Clowney reach double-digit sacks like these guys like Myles Garrett, his new teammate, Shaq Barrett do. But actually, Jadeveon Clowney has never gotten double-digit sacks in his career, which is a red flag in my opinion. But again, they're not committing to him long-term or anything like that. It's a 1-year, $10 million deal. It's a prove-it deal. And again, if he does ball out this year, I don't think Cleveland would necessarily be the team to hand him that extension. They have other guys that they need to pay, specifically Baker Mayfield and Nick Chubb coming up. But again, Cleveland is all in trying to win a Super Bowl before they have to pay Baker Mayfield and some of these guys. They feel as if they're closer than maybe the media believes they are, and they think they're a few superstars away or other couple guys away. They obviously need better help on the secondary. They go ahead and get John Johnson III, the safety from the Los Angeles Rams. He's a big-time safety in this league. Denzel Ward is really coming into his own, and of course they have Greedy Williams as well. I wouldn't hate them drafting another corner potentially in the first round. I love everything about Cleveland's offense. Their tight ends, their line, their receiving core, and their running backs are all great. They need help on the defensive end. And while the defensive line is certainly stacked, and they might have the best pure pass rusher in the league right now in Myles Garrett, who's getting anywhere between 12 and 17 sacks a year now, Jadeveon Clowney is another really, really good guy, specifically on the run defense side. That's going to help a lot. What I think he will produce the best at is helping beat the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens have obviously been one of the premier, if not the premier, best run offenses in the NFL. Their entire game is based off of running the ball with guys like J.K. Dobbins now, who's really taken over that backfield after Mark Ingram has moved on and Gus Edwards has moved on as well. But, of course, Lamar Jackson is the biggest component of that offense, and he obviously uses his legs more than anything else to make plays for his team. Jadeveon Clowney, historically, throughout his entire career, has been an excellent, excellent run stopper, and a physical, tough division that they play in obviously requires tough, physical defensive players. Jadeveon Clowney is certainly that. Now, will you get Jadeveon Clowney for 16 games? History would tell you, again, no. He averages about 11 games per year. Obviously missed half the season last year. The year before that, missed 3 games. Will he be giving you all 16 games? Because again, if Jadeveon Clowney can get back to that 2018 form, you could say that Cleveland might have the best pass rush pairing in the NFL right now. Seriously, if you put a 2017 Jadeveon Clowney, which again gave you 9.5 sacks and over 55 solo tackles, and combine him with Myles Garrett, who's going to get you at least 15 sacks as well, you're talking about serious, serious threats on the defensive line that pretty much, I don't know if any offensive line unit could really stop. As good as the offensive line has been throughout the years for Pittsburgh, and as good as it has been for Baltimore the last couple of seasons as well, if you have Jadeveon Clowney, who could get you anywhere between 8 and maybe even 10 sacks if he decides to have a career year at 28 years old in Cleveland, pair him with Myles Garrett, who is probably the best pure edge rusher in the league right now, that can win you football games alone. Teams have won football games specifically in the regular season just because they have dominated the line of scrimmage on the both offensive and defensive end. You could argue that Cleveland already has the best offensive line in football right now. Pro Football Focus rated them number 2, only behind the Tampa Bay Buccaneers the second half of the season, which in my opinion is when you really see what the teams are going to be like going forward in the future. And again, my biggest concern with Cleveland now isn't their offense. I think their roster is absolutely loaded. I think they've improved their secondary. I need Greedy Williams and Denzel Ward to take another step forward. I need Denzel Ward to really become that superstar shutdown corner. I need Greedy Williams to prove that he can be at least a 3 in the NFL. Maybe they draft another guy in the first round. I don't know if Cleveland could somehow trade up and get with J.C. Horn. J.C. Horn, in my opinion, who I had going 10 to the Dallas Cowboys in my recent mock draft, would be an absolute stud in Cleveland. If you want to talk about long, physical corners, reminds me a lot of Richard Sherman, Xavier Howard, but with a little bit more physicality. Again, that would require a trade up, but Cleveland has been aggressive in the past. They should be going all in. They should be going win now. Again, the question that they still have to answer this offseason is the OBJ question, but it's looking like he's going to be with the team going forward. Again, great backs. They extended Kareem Hunt, an incredible offensive line, adding Jadeveon Clowney now, who again I think has been an overrated player throughout his career, but again, 1 year, $10 million is absolutely nothing. And this is probably the biggest year of Jadeveon Clowney's life. He needs to prove to NFL teams that he is worthy of a big-time contract extension going forward, and that he can be a top premier edge rusher in this league, because when you are a top premier edge rusher in this league, you get the 3 to 5 year deals worth anywhere between $10 and $15 million a year, which is what Jadeveon Clowney has wanted the last 3 seasons. Now, the final thing that concerns me about Cleveland is, again, they absolutely have a stacked roster. Now, the defensive line, in my opinion, was already top 5 before adding Clowney, and now Clowney on a contract year would only make that even better. Again, it was already a strength, and now it's even more of a strength. The secondary concerns me a little bit still, and the only other thing that concerns me is their schedule. They have a lot of hard games. They already play in one of the toughest divisions in football. I think the Bengals are going to take a step forward, even though I don't like their coach. Baltimore's obviously going to be a really good minimum of a 10-win team this year. Pittsburgh could take a step back, but they're a tough out either way. They also still have to place on the road Kansas City, Green Bay, New England, and the Chargers, who I believe will take a big-time step next year forward as well. The Vikings away also isn't a great game either. And then at home, they have to face teams like Denver and Las Vegas and Chicago too. But again, easier home games than road games for sure. I think Cleveland will probably be one of the strongest home teams heading into next season. But one of the things that they're really probably going to struggle with is those road games going up against some of the top premier talent like Kansas City, Green Bay, and the LA Chargers as well, and maybe even New England if Cam Newton proves to be an elite quarterback again in this league, or if they go and they trade up for a guy like Justin Fields or Trey Lance. So again, the schedule is a little bit brutal for Cleveland, but their roster's absolutely loaded, and adding a guy like Jadeveon Clowney is only going to do better things for them and their defensive line going forward. Again, it was already a strength for them, and if not their biggest strength, besides maybe their offensive weaponry unit, but now the defensive line, which was already, again, top 5 in football, probably just became top 3 in football with the acquisition of Jadeveon Clowney. And again, he just has to prove it this year, and I think he desperately wants to, too. He wants to get that bag. He wants that long-term secure contract. He's wanted this since 2018. This would be the best opportunity for him to do so. Cleveland's probably going to be first or second in the league in national primetime games this year as well. That's going to be more eyes on you, showing up the biggest games and the biggest moments on ESPN, NFL Network, CBS, that type of stuff. And that matters in the NFL, and that moves your brand forward and things like that. And if Jadeveon Clowney can have a resurgence year next year, not only would it just be a resurgence year, it would be a resurgence year on probably a deep playoff team with the first or second most nationally televised games in the NFL. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch Jadeveon Clowney and the Cleveland Browns next year, and I absolutely cannot wait to see how they perform against some of the top teams in the NFL next year. That's going to do it for this segment. On the other side of this short break, I do want to get to some of Justin Fields' Pro Day clips that were leaked by the Ohio State football program, some of the teams that were there, and I want to give you 2 teams that I think should be really, really looking after Justin Fields and why I think he could be this year's Justin Herbert. We'll get into all that great stuff right after this short break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masfred. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the show if you are a returning listener. We really do appreciate you. I just finished giving you my spiel on Justin Fields and why I am personally advocating for him to be the third overall pick in this year's draft class. Again, I think out of the remaining quarterbacks San Francisco is going to have to choose from, again, that's Lance, Mac Jones, and Justin Fields. I think Fields possesses the best ability of playmaking, accuracy, and NFL readiness. Again, I know that they said they want to keep Jimmy Garoppolo for at least a year on the roster. No teams really mean that. They want to get to their guy as soon as possible because, again, these are people you are paying at the end of the day. And the sooner San Francisco can get out of the Jimmy Garoppolo contract, the sooner they can use that money to add more pieces to surround their future guy, maybe Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, whoever it may be. But if Mac Jones does go third overall to the San Francisco 49ers, I think some team will be getting an absolute massive steal in Justin Fields. I think two teams to keep an eye on for many in case Mac Jones does go third are New England and Denver. I think those are the two biggest teams that will probably have interest in Justin Fields. I don't blame them. My pro comparison for him is a more mobile Dak Prescott. Not that Dak Prescott is immobile. I just think if Dak used his mobility more and maybe the Cowboys called more designed run plays and zone options and things like that, that's what Justin Fields would be. I think he's got a little bit of a stronger arm than Dak too, but I think Dak has a really, really nice throwing motion. I think Justin Fields' mechanics could be tweaked a little bit, specifically with his footwork and the way his arm moves. I think it could be a little bit more cleaner, probably have a higher release point as well. But Justin Fields is still an absolutely incredible quarterback prospect, incredible dynamic athlete, and I think he should be going third overall to San Francisco. Now, for this segment, I want to recap a couple of other NFL storylines that recently made way this week. One of them being that Patriots' longtime slot receiver Julian Edelman retired from the NFL today, or a couple days ago, I should say, after 11 years in the NFL. People obviously will know him most for what he did in that Atlanta Super Bowl, in which he won Super Bowl MVP and having over 150 yards. I think he had double-digit catches. And, of course, that crazy circus shot that we all remember in that Atlanta Super Bowl that he caught right about an inch above the turf there to give New England an absolutely huge first down. And eventually they would win the game, coming back 28-3. And there's been a big debate on if Julian Edelman is a Hall of Famer or not. And my biggest answer to that question is it's not really my job to decide if Julian Edelman is a Hall of Famer or not. Does he have the statistics to get into the Hall of Fame? Yes and no. When you look at Julian Edelman's Hall of Fame resume, you see a multiple-time Super Bowl champion, a Super Bowl MVP, and essentially statistically the second best playoff receiver of all time. Now, when you just go off that alone, that screams Hall of Famer to me, not to mention that he was part of maybe the biggest dynasty in all of sports, was arguably the most important receiver in all of those years in New England. Obviously, they've had bigger names catch passes from Tom Brady. Obviously, Randy Moss, Rob Gronkowski are the two probably most known pass catchers Tom Brady has ever played with in New England. But then there's guys like Wes Welker and Deion Branch and Julian Edelman. Where do they fall in the dynasty? Julian Edelman is obviously a Patriots Ring of Honor member or Patriots Hall of Famer, whatever they have. Is he an NFL Hall of Famer? I'm not exactly sure, and in my opinion, I don't think you can give a definitive argument that he is a Hall of Famer in order for him to get in maybe on the first ballot, but I do think that he has some things in the record book, like those playoff stats and his rings, that could warrant him potentially getting in depending on the class. So my final opinion on Julian Edelman, on if he's going to make the Hall of Fame or not, is I really do believe it's going to depend on what class he is. I don't think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I understand that he has all those playoff records, but again, in the regular season, he only had over 1,000 yards 3 times. When you stack up his resume against guys like Santonio Holmes, Deion Branch, I think Hines Ward as well, 3 guys who have not made the Hall of Fame, his stats look a little bit worse. But at the end of the day, at the biggest moments in the biggest games, in the clutchest moments, for the biggest dynasty in all of sports, and again, everyone was always bringing their A game against the Patriots because they always wanted to beat them regular season or playoffs. Nobody was better in the clutch. Nobody was more physical. Nobody was more tough. And again, Julian Edelman is the ultimate, sort of football guy story. A guy who grinded, played secondary for a number of years early in New England, played special teams, was a complete grinder, worked for every yard he got, worked for every catch he got, and that's something you have to respect as a football fan, as a sports fan, not to mention those playoff records that he has. And again, I will never forget his memorable game against the Atlanta Falcons, and it was a really sad way to see Julian Edelman go. He's the ultimate tough guy, ultimate competitor. You didn't want to see him retire before Tom Brady, but at 34 years old, his knees just weren't doing it for him anymore. And again, he had that one really nice game last year against the Kansas City Chiefs, but also was really not much of a non-factor last year. And the year before that, he wasn't really much of a factor for the Patriots either. And again, the injuries just eventually caught up with him. And he took a lot of hits over the middle for the New England Patriots, for Tom Brady, and won them a lot of games. And he had a really, really awesome career. Again, he retires with 137 games played, over 600 total receptions, over 6,500 yards, and over 35 touchdowns. An incredible career for Julian Edelman, multiple Super Bowl champion, of course, won Super Bowl MVP of the year against the Falcons as well. Is he a Hall of Famer? That's not my job to decide. Would I personally put Julian Edelman on the Hall of Fame? I would honestly lean towards yes, with the condition that some other guys get in. I think that Julian Edelman has a Hall of Fame resume as a baseline, but that doesn't mean he should necessarily be in if he's being compared to other guys who haven't necessarily gone in. To put it simpler, if Julian Edelman gets into the Hall of Fame, I think there's a lot of guys who haven't made the Hall who deserve to get in, who have maybe had better careers than Julian Edelman, but that doesn't necessarily mean Julian Edelman doesn't deserve to make the Hall of Fame. It's hard to sort of explain how statistically the second best playoff receiving wide receiver of all time, how he wouldn't be in the Hall of Fame when, of course, we're taught that the playoff games matter the most and they're most important, and that's when all eyes are watching and things like that. But that's for the media and the players to decide who makes the Hall and who doesn't. I want to transition now to the big-time signing that the Arizona Cardinals had recently, and that was James Conner, the running back, going from Pittsburgh to Arizona. Arizona was in desperate need of a running back. They let Kenyon Drake walk. They didn't want to pay, not necessarily the hefty price tag that he cost, but he did cost a decent amount of chunk of change for a position that isn't necessarily a need of them. They are a spread, pass-happy offense. They obviously went out there and spent on some defensive players as well this year, such as J.J. Watt and some others, let some guys like Hassan Reddick go. But they decided to bring in James Conner as the running back to replace Kenyon Drake, and they still have Chase Edmonds there as well, who they love a lot. This, in my opinion, takes the Cardinals out of the running back room, at least in the first round. They could go look at running back second or third round, but in my most recent mock draft, I had them picking actually Najee Harris at 16. So in my opinion, their draft approach probably changes a little bit now. Offensive line is something they should seriously consider addressing. They still need a big-time cornerback to replace Patrick Peterson, who just left for the Vikings this offseason. Maybe they go cornerback. Maybe a guy like J.C. Horn falls, or maybe even Patrick Surtain falls. Maybe they trade up or something like that. Don't be surprised if they also add receiver. Cliff Kingsbury is always looking for new weapons to use with Kyler Murray and things like that. Who knows? It wouldn't surprise me if the Cardinals added a guy like Kadarius Toney at pick 16. Hell, if Jalen Waddle is there, I know Cliff Kingsbury will take him. And again, they want to make life easier for Kyler Murray, and I think they are a legitimate team this year. But I do believe it is a make-or-break year for Cliff Kingsbury. There's a lot of weapons on that offense that Kyler Murray gets to use in the spread offense, and I don't think there's any excuse for the Arizona Cardinals to not make the playoffs this year. I think Steve Keim, the general manager, has been proven right on the Josh Rosen, Kyler Murray decision. I think getting rid of Josh Rosen, obviously trading him to the Dolphins for a second and a fourth at the time. He's now the backup or practice squad guy in San Francisco. I don't necessarily remember. And of course, Kyler Murray looks like a superstar in the making. So I do believe that Steve Keim has been proven right on that decision. I don't necessarily believe Steve Keim has been proven right on the Cliff Kingsbury decision. They obviously had a really great start to the year last year, had some iconic moments, the Hail Mary versus Buffalo. They had some great games against teams like the Seattle Seahawks and things like that. But they ended up missing the playoffs and losing out to a team in the Chicago Bears that had really one of the worst quarterback rooms in all of football, yet they decided to make the playoffs over the Arizona Cardinals. That's not a great look if you're Cliff Kingsbury. And in my opinion, his deadline this year is to make the playoffs. Otherwise, his job could be on the line. I don't think that Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray are attached at the hip necessarily. Again, I think Keim's been proven right that Kyler is a superstar quarterback in the making. That being said, Cliff Kingsbury is not the only head coach in the world that can run a system around Kyler Murray. Plenty of guys have used the spread before. Kyler would even thrive in some other collegiate-type schemes that some other guys could use as well. So Cliff Kingsbury's job is not safe just because Kyler Murray looks like a good quarterback in the future and looks like a guy who could potentially win the Cardinals a lot of games going forward. Cliff Kingsbury needs to deliver with the whole team, not just the quarterback position or not just the offense. They need, in my opinion, to win at least 11 games this year, make the playoffs. They don't necessarily have to win that division because, again, the Rams look like a Super Bowl team. San Francisco, depending on who their quarterback is, could be a Super Bowl team. And Seattle is a damn good team as well, who could go on a run at any moment and win, 8 or 9 straight and look like one of the best teams in the NFL like we know that they've done in the past. So, again, hardest division in football. They don't necessarily have to to win it. But if the Cardinals were to miss the playoffs next year, despite all the new shiny toys that Kyler Murray has to work with on offense, that defense getting a lot better, not to mention the draft that the Cardinals have traditionally nailed the past couple of drafts, I really do believe they'll probably go secondary with that 16th overall pick, maybe even linebacker / pass rusher to replace Hassan Riddick, who went to the Carolina Panthers on a one-year deal. But at the end of the day, Cliff Kingsbury needs to deliver this year, not just Kyler Murray. I think Kyler Murray will put up the stats, he'll put up the numbers, he'll look like a success. And again, Steve Keim's been proven right on that pick. It's more Cliff Kingsbury now who needs to deliver on the team as a whole, winning a bunch more games than they have in the past, and specifically making the playoffs. That is a leap that the Arizona Cardinals, in my opinion, have to make, not should make. In my opinion, they probably should have made that leap last year. And again, I was one of those people that bought into the Cardinals and thought Kyler Murray could have an Offensive Player of the Year / MVP type season. And he really did look like that player pre-shoulder injury about the first 8 to 10 weeks of the year, but they completely collapsed about the last 5-6 weeks of the season. Chicago came screaming in, made the playoffs over them. I don't think the Arizona Cardinals can let something like that happen again this year. Otherwise, some people will have to answer for those losses, specifically Cliff Kingsbury. The final thing I want to talk about in this segment is Giovani Bernard, after being released by the Cincinnati Bengals. Sort of was a surprise cut. Bernard's been with the Bengals his entire career. He's in his low 30s right now, and he's been one of the heart and soul and captains of the Cincinnati Bengals for the past couple of years now. Has made some crazy plays in the pass game and the run game. He's sort of a receiving back. Smaller guy, 5'8", 5'9", sort of the speed, elusive receiving back type that Tom Brady has worked with for years and years. Guys like James White, things like that. He signs with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on a one-year deal, and in my opinion, he might be the best running back in that crew. Again, Leonard Fournette had an incredible playoff run, and I think Ronald Jones certainly has his moments. But Giovani Bernard is one of the more underrated running backs in the league. And again, last year as the backup for the Cincinnati Bengals, you have to keep in mind here, Giovani Bernard is an older veteran in his early to mid 30s. But again, he's backing up a guy in Joe Mixon who plays a very similar style to him. So again, they're not necessarily splitting carries. Giovani Bernard is a clear backup to Joe Mixon. Yet last year, he still had 416 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns. Not to mention he's got over almost 4,000 yards for a career and over 22 touchdowns for a career as well. Giovani Bernard is a legitimate threat in both the running and passing game, and a guy like Tom Brady is going to use him to perfection. We know how Tom Brady and the New England Patriots for years and years operated with running back by committee, having multiple running backs, James White, Rex Burkhead, Sony Michel, Stephen Ridley back in the day, Steven Jackson back in the day, LeGarrette Blount. They've always had multiple running backs, and they've never had a true one workhorse back. I think that's something that Tom Brady has brought over to the Tampa Bay style. Again, they sort of have Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones for the powers, thunder lightning combo. Giovani Bernard's going to be an awesome option out of the backfield in the passing game, in the screen game, and specifically in the outside zone run scheme game that Bruce Arians loves to run as well. Just another addition, just another weapon for Tom Brady to work with in their quest to potentially start sort of a mini dynasty in Tampa Bay. In my opinion, they're the best roster from top to bottom. They decided to bring pretty much everybody back. I think Antonio Brown will eventually re-sign with Tampa Bay. I know some people have talked about him maybe going to the Ravens or the Seahawks. I think it's all sort of a play on social media for Antonio Brown to try to get some more money from Tampa Bay. My guess is Tampa has offered him the minimum. He probably wants at least whatever, a little bit higher above that, or deserves a little bit more. Wouldn't surprise when they eventually make a deal. I think Tom wants to play with Antonio more, and obviously Antonio Brown loves catching passes from Tom Brady. So I think they'll bring back the entire Super Bowl roster, plus some of their smaller additions like Giovani Bernard and others. And in my opinion, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers should really be the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl next year over teams like Kansas City, the Rams, the Packers, the Ravens, other teams that have had really good off seasons. I think the Bucs just keep getting their roster better and better. And when it comes to their draft strategy, I'm not necessarily sure who they'll go. I don't see a clear-cut defined hole in their roster. I could see them maybe going secondary, maybe interior offensive line. But other than that, Tom Brady and the Buccaneers just keep on rolling in this offseason. They keep finding new talent. Again, Bernard was a surprise cut who ended up going to the former Super Bowl champions, Tampa Bay. He'll be an awesome option on third downs and others. That's going to do it for this segment. On the other side of this final short break, I do want to get to some NBA storylines, specifically the Brooklyn Nets, and why I worry that they might not even make it out of the Eastern Conference. We'll get into all that good stuff right after this final short break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network for today's final segment of today's absolutely packed show. For the final segment, I do want to talk about some NBA headlines. Again, in my last segment, I just finished giving you my spiel on some of the major NFL storylines going on right now. Again, I'm not sure if Julian Edelman's a Hall of Famer, but what I do know is that if he is a Hall of Famer, in some regards, he does deserve that title. But some other guys like Hines Ward should probably get in as well. In regards to James Conner and Giovani Bernard, I think those are two really nice additions for the offenses of the Cardinals and Buccaneers, and I think could make some major contributions. And again, the running back position is one that is not really overvalued anymore. A lot of guys are getting one-year cheap deals because of guys getting running backs in the draft. And again, we see every year a team find a guy in the 4th or 5th round that ends up being top 5 in the league in rushing. James Robinson this year, we've seen with Antonio Gibson. Obviously, Alvin Kamara came out of the 4th round. Aaron Jones out of UTEP came out of nowhere as well. So running backs come from all sorts of places and all sorts of rounds, which means that in free agency, a lot of guys aren't going to get top dollar unless you are that top 5 running back in the NFL that is getting 1,200 plus yards and 8 plus touchdowns and is probably a contributor in the passing game as well. And that's just not what every running back can do. So guys like James Conner, Giovani Bernard get cut from their teams or not brought back. And even with their new teams, they're not getting these huge, crazy 3-year, $10 million plus a year deals that maybe running backs of old got. They're getting this 1-year prove-it deal, just contribute for this year. And if you're a really great contributor, we'll extend you. Or if not, you can just ride the 1-year deal wave from team to team. And that's just how it has been for running backs the last couple of years. I want to transition now to the NBA and specifically the Brooklyn Nets because I have some concerns that they might not even make it out of the Eastern Conference again. This is me talking after they lost to the Lakers pretty badly despite the Lakers having absolutely none of their players. Then they beat the Timberwolves just barely. And then the next night, which is tonight when you're listening to this, they played the Philadelphia 76ers and lost in a tie-breaking game. And I have some doubts about the Brooklyn Nets for a couple of reasons. One, they're one of the worst, if not the worst, defensive teams in the NBA. When you look at teams that have won championships throughout the years, they've all been able to play at least good defense in the playoffs, but when the playoffs come around, obviously offense ticks up and defense matters way more in the regular season. Do I think Brooklyn is a better defensive team than they're probably showing in the regular season now? Yes, I do. I don't think they're maybe the worst defensive team in the NBA, but what I do know is that Brooklyn will most likely be the worst defensive team in the playoffs for sure. And I know that when they face some of the higher teams in the Eastern Conference and their playoff runs like Miami, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia, those are 3 teams that pride themselves on big physical defenses. And again, Brooklyn can outscore anybody, but when they can't stop anybody and one of the defenses, like for example the Heat's defense, which is top 5, Philadelphia's defense, which might be the best in the league, and Milwaukee's defense, which is also top 5, if they can hold you to just whatever, not necessarily under 100 points a game, but even if they hold you to 105 to 110, your defense is so bad that you're giving up 114 points a night, and that means you're going to lose 4 out of 7-game series. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if Brooklyn is this year's version of the Los Angeles Clippers. We want to talk about the comparisons between the two. There's a lot of them. One, obviously, they made one really big, splashy offseason move, obviously adding Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, Kyrie and KD for them. They also added James Harden. They won the buyout market. If you remember last year, the Clippers won the buyout market, getting every single person who was bought out. They wanted to go play for the Clippers. They wanted to beat LeBron and the Lakers. They wanted to meet in the Western Conference Finals, yada, yada this, yada, yada that. Excitement. They're also similar in that they're both considered the little brothers in their city. The Clippers have always been franchise number 2 in Los Angeles. The Brooklyn Nets have always been franchise number 2 in New York. And the final comparison is that their stars don't play together. We see Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden on paper, and we think, wow, that's definitely the best trio in the NBA. That can win a championship. Nobody else has a big three like them. Yet they've only played a handful of games together. And as soon as Kevin Durant seems to be healthy and Kyrie seems to be, here and present with the team and playing night in, night out, James Harden's now being reevaluated in 10 to 14 days. Again, they haven't played a lot of games together, and Doc Rivers has said multiple times that when he was the coach of the Clippers, one of the main reasons why they were bounced so early by the Denver Nuggets is they hadn't really played with each other. They had absolutely zero to little chemistry among them. And again, they're superstars that only played, I think, 15 to 20 games together in an 82-game season in the NBA, which is something that can't really happen considering the teams like the Lakers and teams like the Heat last year and teams really like Philadelphia this year as well and Utah this year as well are playing with so much camaraderie and so much teamness that the NBA this year has been a lot about the system. There's been a ton of injuries, there's been a ton of movement and things like that. The system is thriving more than ever in the NBA in this COVID year, and I don't know what Brooklyn's system is besides let's just score points and give it to our players. And again, they keep adding players in the buyout market, Blake Griffin, LaMarcus Aldridge, but the common denominator with all these guys is that they're past their prime and they can't play any defense. And again, when you're going down to the wire with teams like the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are the worst team in the NBA right now, and you can't stop them for anything, how are you supposed to beat the Los Angeles Lakers and LeBron and AD are healthy 4 out of 7 times in the series? Or Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Doc Rivers, and that stacked defensive team 4 out of 7 times in the series? Or Eric Spoelstra, Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, Victor Oladipo, Andre Iguodala, Eric Spoelstra. How are you going to beat them 4 out of 7 times? Even Giannis Antetokounmpo, Drew Holiday, and Chris Middleton are 3 elite defenders. What are you going to do when they're holding you to 105 points? Because again, if Brooklyn only scores 105 points, they're going to lose. They give up 114 a game, and they're a bottom 3 defensive team in the league. Will that improve slightly in the playoffs? Sure. Will Harden and KD and Kyrie probably try more on defense? Sure. But all 3 of them aren't great defensive players to begin with. And while Kevin Durant has shown some ability to block and be a rim protector, that's not going to be enough in the playoffs to win you a playoff series. And again, when you're giving up 114 points a night, you're going to have to elevate and do something in the playoffs. Otherwise, you are going to get bounced early. So with the combination of that and the fact that they haven't really played each other a whole lot, it wouldn't surprise me at all if this year's version of the Los Angeles Clippers are the Brooklyn Nets. I'm also seriously starting to question Steve Nash because, again, he talked about in his press conference how they need to play defense and need to get better and camaraderie and things like that. Yet when there's not a playoff game, but the game against Philadelphia tonight was a tiebreaker for the Eastern Conference, and it would have, in case there was a tie, who would win the East between Brooklyn and Philadelphia. They're the top 2 teams in the East right now. They have similar records. It very well could be tied at the end of the year. Instead of playing Kevin Durant, who can't play back-to-backs, obviously, against the Philadelphia game, which is the more important game, he decided to play Kevin Durant last night against the Minnesota Timberwolves, which led to KD not playing against the Philadelphia 76ers for rest, and they got blown out. Again, that's not a head coaching move that a lot of guys make. You would traditionally want to play your best players in the more important games. And while every regular season game matters or doesn't matter, whatever your perspective is, if you're a glass half full or half empty type of person. Again, some people argue that all 82 games matter in the NBA. Some argue that it's just one game out of 82. It doesn't really matter. But when a game is a tie-breaking game, and the difference between maybe you finishing first or second in the East, having home court advantage in the Eastern Conference Finals, or not having home court advantage, I would personally want my best players playing each and every one of those games. And when James Harden is evaluated every 10 to 14 days, as soon as he gets injured, Kevin Durant is finally healthy. And again, these guys haven't played together before. And even in the biggest moments, now 2 of them are sitting out. It's just Kyrie Irving, and they lose to Philadelphia. Just don't be surprised if they can't turn it off from off to on like the Clippers couldn't do either. And again, we all wanted to see the matchup between the Los Angeles Clippers and the Los Angeles Lakers in the Western Conference Finals, and we weren't given that opportunity because of the lack of teamship, partnership, whatever, experience, chemistry, because of the Los Angeles Clippers had that year. Wouldn't surprise me if we don't get that Brooklyn Nets Los Angeles Lakers finals matchup that we're all hoping and waiting for to see in the summertime. Again, we all want to see KD versus LeBron, and we all want to see AD versus Harden and Kyrie. But if Brooklyn can't stop anybody, they might not even make it out of the East, let alone beat the Los Angeles Lakers in a 7-game series when they are fully healthy. That's going to do it for today's episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Before I let you go, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general, and follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Again, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I've been your host, Alex Masferrer, and I will see you all in the next one.